I called to order the study session of October 27th, 2025. All council members are present tonight, and I will move right on into regular business, and I'll call on Jason Wilson for 2026 legislative agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Tonight, we're going to be talking about our 2026 legislative agenda. I'll turn it over to the Communications Director, Carmen Palmer, who will also introduce our lobbyist, Mr. Clark.
All right. So many of you have met Bill or heard from him before. So here we are already looking at the 26th session. I'm going to have actually Bill lead off with kind of what we're anticipating in that session, and then we'll take it from there. Bill.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Glad to be in front of you again. As Jason and Carmen said, we're getting close to the start of the session. The session starts January 12th. And so the 2026 session will be a short session. Recall that the long session is the budget session. So the 2025 session is where the legislature adopts the biennial 2-year budget, introduces lots of bills that didn't pass in 2025 remain alive for the 2026 session and kind of start off at their highest point in the process to start the 2026 session. And then this session is only 60 days in length, so it's January 12th through March 11th under the calendar. I think the major, and so typically the shorter sessions will involve dealing with bills that were introduced in the first year but didn't pass and continue to get worked on and can pass in the second year. There's always a number of new bills that come in, but just because of the schedule and how tight the different committee cutoffs are and such, it's more common that bills that pass are ones that were introduced during the first year. So we'll see both a mixture of bills that we saw last year plus new ones. The other kind of major point for the short session, the supplemental session, is to deal with supplemental budgets. And typically, the supplemental budget year includes some additional spending. I think this year will be the opposite, at least as to the operating budget. You know, last year, the legislature passed its largest ever tax increase in state history with a number of different tax increases. Even with that, there's a projected deficit for the state for the 2-year biennial budget. Depending on who you talk to, it's, 1.2 billion to 1.7 billion, depending on who's doing the analysis. There's some indication that OFM, Office of Financial Management, the state's budget office, thinks that by the time you get into the middle of the 2026 session, it could be closer to 3 billion, which is a real problem, especially coming in after a big tax increase. It sounds like from legislative leadership, they don't want to do yet another tax increase, especially during an election year. And so those numbers are kind of projected based on slight slowing of the economy, some of the impacts of the federal House Resolution 1 or BBB that have changes to Medicaid in the state of Washington and SNAP, the food assistance program. So it's a combination both of, I think, things happening at the state level, over-optimistic projections about how much the tax bills will actually generate in their first couple years, and then just a general kind of slight slowing of economic growth within the state. So the budget picture will really dominate. It'll be somewhat interesting. There are 9 special elections going on in November. 3 of them are very close Senate races. Those will be interesting to watch. And then with 2026 as an election year, typically they'll come in for 60 days, figure out what they need to do to get the balanced budget for this year, and then get out of town. So that's the quick kind of preview of what the session will look like.
Any questions for Bill before I launch into?
Any questions for Bill down there? Any questions down here? No.
And he's not going anywhere. He's sticking with me as we go through this. So just to clarify there.
Okay.
He's not off the hook. So I'm going to go ahead and share our agenda. I will say before I bring this up, this particular draft is a bit of a departure. It's a bit of a departure from what we've been doing and a bit of a return to what we initially were doing. So you heard Bill say, that those that are introduced can come back and wherever they were when the session ended. 2 years ago, we kind of used that as a chart to say, these are the bills we like. These are the bills that could be good with some nuance. And these are the bills we don't like. I actually started off your agenda for this year looking like that, and it was a wall of words. So many bills have been introduced last session. Bill, it was an unprecedented amount, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was really getting unwieldy to the point that nobody was going to read it. You think about our legislators in Olympia, they have all these different bills to track. They were not going to sit down and read, a nicely thought out treatise from the city of Sumner that was full of words. So we're trying a new strategy, and the thought process behind this is just a little bit different. The other feedback we've heard through the grapevine is that, as we've talked about in our previous couple of years, state seems to be having this urge to play a little bit more in the local government sandbox, what feels to us a bit like micromanaging things at the local level. We have pushed back on that, not only us, but every city in Washington. And that has created this kind of us versus them dynamic with legislators. Not so much for the city, for us, for City of Sumner, we have a great relationship with the 3 in the 31st. Just a reminder, we are covered by 2 districts. Most of Sumner is in the 31st. The 25th has the cemetery. So arguably our most dense population, if you're not counting, alive. But that the 25th has always worked well with us with the 31st. They have always listened to our concerns, gone to bat for us. So typically in Sumner, when we talk about our 6 legislators, and that is the 3 in the 31st and the 3 in the 25th. When we went to the AWC thing, we were hearing from other cities who can't even get a meeting with their own legislators. That's how contentious the situation is. And while we're lucky we don't have that kind of relationship here with either of our districts, we don't want to get there, and we don't want to feed that kind of us versus them mentality. So a few hours before this was due in the packet, Jason and I kind of met and didn't like the wall of words, didn't like most of the bills introduced we didn't like. So it looked like a lot of no. And we switched this up a little bit to borrow from nonprofits, trying to hone in on the things most people want to do. Even in this kind of society we're living in, Steve's and ours, there are goals people want to achieve together, cities and state. So trying to hone in on those 3 and then picking one thing that would move that forward and one thing, in our opinion, that would work against that. So that's the agenda you have. I will bring it up on my screen. So, all right. So we split these up into 3 big takeaways. And again, some of the graphics are just to break up what could potentially be a wall of words. So the first one is keep housing affordable in Sumner. Whether you like growth or don't like growth or whatever, most people want to keep housing affordable one way or the other. The main takeaway, and this was one thing AWC recommended, for those watching don't know, AWC is the Association of Washington Cities. They recommended is reminding people in Olympia that housing is coming, that actually different steps they've taken works. And especially in Sumner, there is housing in the permit pipeline. So letting them know that is coming. So that's the first thing, which is kind of a positive version of, please don't hit us with any more code changes or recommendations at the planning level. Our positive, even with the budget, how it is, Bill and others have, reminded us to still get in and ask for the local capital projects. Last year, it was the River Grove pedestrian bridge. A lot of good feedback on that. We didn't make it just because there are so many projects, but a lot of good feedback on that. So it's here once again. The reason it's under housing is because there are about 1,000 people in our city living in that area, including some of our council members who know, it's cut off from the rest of the city. This pedestrian bridge does so much to bring people. If you look at a map overhead, they are very, very close to services, schools, even walking back into the downtown to the transit center, if there was a pedestrian bridge. The other piece of this is in a Lahar, it gives that whole area an out. So that just keeps that housing viable and affordable in that neck of the woods for Sumner. The opposition, the one we don't like the most on this is a recommendation, the bill that would allow up to 2 we would have to allow up to 2 mobile units per lot. That's a lot, especially when you think of some of Sumner's smaller lots. So we get what they're trying to do, but trying to show them what we think would work and what we think wouldn't work. Any questions or feedback on this piece?
Any questions? No? Matt?
I'll just say I appreciate the pedestrian bridge being on there. Yeah, I think you mentioned being under affordable housing. Maybe it's a little bit of a wonky fit, but I care a lot about that project. I know other people that do. And I do think about the connections to services, resources, schools, parks, all those things. That neighborhood, I've long thought it's got to be difficult to live there, to get out of there. And you're always kind of fighting against traffic just to get out. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of that one.
Yeah, anybody else? No?
Right, I'll move on to the next one. This heading was actually, again, it was actually stemmed from a recommendation AWC made, and that's remind the state how much revenue they generate in your community. So, you know, this whole agenda is kind of about shifting the prepositions, not what we would like them to provide to the city, but what we would like them to provide to the public through the city, and what would help them. As Bill said, it's not looking good for them with their budget. A lot of the language coming out from cities is typically don't cut this, don't cut shared revenue, don't cut that. We decided to go a little bit more directly to them. And so Cassandra estimated, I thought it was the world math problem from hell. She said it was no big deal and she was looking for a greater challenge. But based on what the city brings in property tax and sales tax alone, we estimated what the state receives from within the city of Sumner, and it's 61 million a year. So what we would like them to do is think about those things that will help keep our economy strong, that will keep that revenue source for them. Of course, that also protects our revenue sources, but we're trying to make this a little bit from my nonprofit world, right? Like help someone achieve what they would like to do through you rather than take the claim yourself. So of course, we did get in there protecting shared revenues. That is the point of this. Really easy, and we've seen it in past sessions. The way to balance such a tricky budget is to kind of push the need to raise taxes onto the cities and say, we balanced the budget and brought you these services without raising your taxes, and then it falls on all of you. So trying to remind them that those shared services are so crucial. Things like wastewater, stormwater, those are the things we need for that first one to bring in more business, to bring in more residential. If that's what they want, we need the infrastructure. So sending them that reminder. On this one, we snuck in two bills that we don't like. One is an idea that we would have to require business in any residential zone. I think this is someone who's picturing that cute corner cafe and thinks this would be a wonderful idea. It's not limited to corners. So, the thought that anybody's neighbor could decide to open a cafe or a bar does not prohibit alcoholic establishments. Is just a wee bit terrifying. Just for the practicality, noise, garbage, parking. So we are recommending that not be advanced. The other one is 1380. This is the one, the colloquial term for this bill that I think the originators don't like, but it's the one everyone refers to as the homeless bill of rights. About requiring what cities couldn't do if there were encampments in our parks and other public spaces. Not actually debating that part of the bill. What we're debating is the bill purposely is written ambiguously, it's a tough word to say, on purpose to drive lawsuits. And so our point is, this is not an anti-homeless bill, this is an anti-lawsuit bill. The more city dollars go toward lawsuits, the less that go to the homeless or anybody else we're trying to serve. So those are the two on the opposed. Any thoughts on this section?
I do have a
Any
question.
question? Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Carmen. So in regard to Sumner providing $61 million a year to the state in sales and property taxes. So if we were to think of a list of like type cities, where do we fall on the list? Middle, bottom, top? Have we ever looked at that?
I have never looked at that. Have you?
I have not specifically looked at that, but I will say that we have a rather high assessed valuation for a city of 11,000.
So the reason I asked is because, you know, we're talking about wanting that, I'm gonna say kind of payback sort of, because we provide that. So I was trying to figure out who might be above us that might get that payback before us. So I'm sure we do because we have that industrial area, but I'd be curious as to if it was a list of 10 cities like type, where we might fall on that list.
Yeah, can you, just so I understand your question, when you say payback first, can you describe to me what exactly you want?
No, it's not what I want. It's what Carmen was talking about in terms of return. For the
What
fact
are
that
the
we
other
provide
cities?
$61 million in taxes. So I was trying to understand that. If in fact there are some things that we're talking about that we could potentially receive back, then are we number 1 on the list or number 10 on the list?
That's where I was going with it. And the way I understand that question would be more, what I hear you saying is if there's a city, the ranking of 10 cities and we are number 9 out of 10, and there's revenue to come back, what I hear you saying is that what's the likelihood that cities 1 through 5 would get money back before us?
Or more, yeah.
And I guess the way I would reframe this is when you look at how much money we're giving to the state, we don't want them imposing additional regulations that restrict our ability to provide essential core services.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what protecting those shared revenues are, them taking revenue from us that's shared through whether that's gas tax or sales tax, or then saying, well, we're going to shift this burden that we're currently responsible for as a state down to the local entity, and they got to figure out how to fund it.
So then maybe we would get less of the shared burden. I'm trying to figure out what the gain is
We
for us providing $61 million to the state. That's all.
It's to remind them that if you are burdening cities more with additional regulations,
Mhm.
that it could hurt businesses or residential tax bases and lower that $61 million because of the type of regulations that they are trying to impose on those other
Okay,
tax producers.
yeah, so that I understand. I don't know that that's how I understood it was said.
And this was one of the hardest ones. We originally had this as
Sure.
protect a $61 million revenue stream for the state,
Mm-hmm.
which was clearer, but it almost sounded like we expected that we were trying to get the 61 million, like protect it from us. That's at least how one staff member, he's like,
Mm-hmm.
kind of reading this backwards. So I will say out of the 3 headers, this is the hardest one, has been the hardest one to.
Oh,
work
I'm
with.
sure, but I think that it just got reflected in a way in which you could understand, you know, the context behind it. So
Yeah,
that's helpful.
there's a better way. It's kind of like investing in us is investing in the state's future revenue.
There you go.
It's
Okay.
it's not give us this and take it away from
Right.
you. It's investing for both of us. Trying to still fit that in.
That's all right. Thank
Or
you.
Carmen, I'll jump in on this one because I know the issue that AWC and others are very wary of is, you know, the legislature focuses on its own budget challenges. And so what happens from time to time is reductions in shared revenue, and then they provide local governments with what the legislature likes to call new revenue tools to say, well, we've given you these new tools to solve your revenue problems locally, but it ends up being a gain to the state, and then it relies on the cities or counties to generate revenue locally. The problem is those revenue tools the money comes from somebody, right? Either homeowners or new businesses. And so you're in this kind of negative cycle where it's a shift of revenue from the local level to the state level that many cities are trying to guard against.
Would it be better if that header was something like invest in the state's future revenue through Sumner?
The revenue term is tricky because
Mhm.
the current legislature likes to talk about, you know, about revenue as it's a code word for new taxes,
Right.
right? So we can work on this. I mean, I see the point of the discussion, and I think it's a solid point to continue to make, but we can work on how it's phrased.
Okay, thank you.
Andy,
Yeah, hey, thank you, Carmen. I really appreciate this. I think one of the questions I'm having is I just trying to remember last year and some of the things that went through in our legislative update after the session was over, and there was a significant amount. So I'm just wondering, as we're kind of chewing on this, if there's a chance to because I know you guys shrunk it down and made it simpler. I appreciate that it's simple. I'm also kind of trying to remember the things that are not on here. And then,
Yes.
and just to see if because I think that would be an area what I would have feedback if we said, hey, you guys picked these two, and I'm like, well, why didn't you pick this one? I'd love to ask those questions, but since we don't have them.
So the balance to this is, first we did this and we honed it down. I should have added in the introduction. There is a page 2. And the purpose of page 2 is to give all of us the guardrails, because there's also, to your point, there's the ones out there we don't think are going to come back or don't worry us as much. But if there's anything we've noticed in the past few sessions is we can't predict where they're going to go. They come up with new things, even things that maybe had been introduced once suddenly get a clause attached that suddenly makes it way more problematic. So hold that thought, because the purpose of the second page is not to send that necessarily to our legislators. They need to see this first page. But the second page gives all of us the guardrails for where the city of Sumner, what we would like to see, so that when a specific bill drops or a clause gets added, Bill or any of you or any of us can speak to it with confidence that we're speaking the way the city of Sumner wants us to speak from these guiding principles. So
Thank you.
hopefully
That's good. That's good clarification. Thanks.
Thank you, Carmen. Councilmember Kenneth.
Yeah, Carmen, I think in two, I'm kind of I have a maybe more generic broad question, which is thinking about, we're talking about Sumner's size and how much we give to the state in terms of revenue and all those things and protecting that. Do we ever band together outside of the AWC, and this might be a question for Bill, but to say like Puyallup, Bonnie Lake, Auburn, like we all are seeing the same issue and we want to all sign our names against this bill or for this bill. Do we ever do that? And is that a part of this type of legislative agenda, or is that in the legislative session process that happens?
It's more in the process, again, having those guardrails, not only what's on this one, the 3 main headers, but also those guiding principles. And whether it's through chief, through WASPIC, the Washington Association of Police Chiefs and Sheriffs. I think I reversed that, but anyway, you get the idea, or just meeting with our local cities. But yes, we have done that many times.
And there have been some joint letters either at the county-wide level, and sometimes all cities participate, sometimes they don't. There's also been corridor. So I can think of times where we have signed letters of support for legislation with Kent and Auburn regarding the 167 corridor. So there is that opportunity. And then there's also all the other legislative agendas that like SHAPE adopts and the Pierce County Regional Council adopt that we're all part of. So there's several touch points in there that Sumner is represented.
Okay, and are council involved in a lot of those, or is that more at the staff level?
A lot of times it involves just the executive branch through the mayor.
Okay.
And I think one thing to remember as an elected body, you're really giving us the guardrails to respond in a very quick manner. A lot of times we may only have 15 to 30 minutes to make a decision of what the city's position is on this. So there's not a lot of opportunity. Now, that doesn't mean that you as electeds yourself cannot, you have the opportunity to go and testify in Olympia that supports the city's legislative agenda. And maybe Bill, I'll tee him up for at the end of this. Maybe that's where Bill can give some helpful hints.
Great.
Yeah, Jason, we can talk about that. Like another example, there was the issue a couple years ago of getting mitigation funding for the impacts on certain cities from the change to destination-based sales tax, which hit, certain cities like Kent, Tukwila, Sumner, hit those cities very hard. And so there was a joint effort with those types of cities that were also affected to pass a bill and then get funding to offset some of the sales tax impacts, things like that. And yeah, we can talk about some of the participation things maybe at the end.
Great, and just thank you all. One more question I just want to take the council's temperature on the bill, the 1175 about businesses in residential zones. First, I want to make sure I understand the word requiring, because I interpret that as allowing for businesses in residential zones. I think it requires cities to allow for
Yes.
businesses. So I just want to make sure I understood that properly. But I know we swapped an email before about kind of the city's stance on this up until this point. And I know you mentioned Ryan's name as well as maybe somebody from a planner's perspective, so I don't know if that's him or Bill maybe knows a lot about this particular bill. But just kind of want to hear what other people might think about that one, because I think to my mind, I love taking cars off roads if we can. And so if there are coffee shops nearby, somebody wants to open up, or a bakery, I think we're all screaming for different things in our community, different variety of things. I'm open to that. I understand there's different challenges that come with that. So I'd really want to know the details of all that and what cities can regulate and what they can't. So maybe I'll just kind of throw it to Ryan, and then if anybody else wants to pop in and share their perspective.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Ken. I'm Ryan Windish, the Community Economic Development Director. This is an intriguing bill. I think it has, as Carmen's already pointed out, a lot of potential downsides. It opens up all residential areas in the community to be available for, small convenience type stores, small like restaurant type establishments, which are nice to have in town. Don't get me wrong. Usually they're kind of organic though, right? They're the old corner stores, been there for 100 years. They're converted storefront into a bakery and a coffee shop. Parking's not great, but you can walk to it. It's quaint, it's small, it's attractive. It adds some charm to your downtown. I think there's a couple things to keep in mind if this were to pass and was a requirement that we allow it. One, I think businesses, if you're smart and you're looking at, I have a house and I want to convert it to commercial, Valley Avenue, Thompson, your collector streets with a lot of traffic are going to be the ones that get picked first, I would assume. And then you're also potentially drawing, I think, market away from our historic downtown. Like you've got empty storefronts down there now. Maybe it's easier to convert a house on Valley Avenue because it's got great visibility. So there's some definite. I think the intent is good, but I think there's some potential downsides to this bill if it were to pass.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective. I definitely don't want to take away from the town center and the businesses down there. I think there's other council members that share their perspective, like that there's empty storefronts there, and we want to get those, humming along again and get more people, staying longer downtown. So yeah, I'll just kind of leave it at that and see what other people might have to say.
Thank you, Barbara.
Well, you're only talking about like coffee shops and small restaurants and small, like a bodega or something. But is that the only things that would be allowed? Because maybe my next door neighbor wants to do an auto repair, spot or something. So I think it's just too vague as far as, what kind of businesses would be allowed.
The bill defines neighborhood cafes and neighborhood stores as the intent for that's what the bill would permit. It allows for the cities to put a maximum size limit on the stores and small businesses as well. But again, I would caution. Anyway, it just needs to be thoughtful. And I can tell you if you brought this forward just as a staff recommendation or a staff proposal, like, hey, we're going to amend the comp plan and we're going to create a commercial zone along Valley Avenue. I think you'd have a lot of concerned neighbors showing up.
And also to jump in on Ryan's point there, I think the challenge that I see in Olympia is the types of, and this is true with housing, it's true with land use legislation like this, functionally the state laws almost have the effect of a local ordinance. And so even though the general subject matter of, having coffee shops in neighborhoods sounds good, in state law, you're having bills that really have the effect of a local ordinance. And so the language has to be exactly right, or else you're stuck with it, because the nature of how some of them are structured is you have to allow X, right? And you can't vary from that. And maybe there's a little flexibility within the statute, but the language is of critical importance. And it just hasn't gotten to a point that it has support from a number of different cities.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Bill, for that. Yeah, the legislation from last year says a city or town must allow neighborhood stores and neighborhood cafes to be permitted in any zone allowing residential uses, provided that a cafe must offer food if alcoholic drinks are offered. So, I mean, that's a thou shalt allow these.
Peanuts.
So now I've changed my entire mind. I'm just kidding. So I like the verbiage that's in here opposing it, because I think we talked about this quite a bit last year, where it creates parking noise, garbage, conflicts with, could plague any small business and tears neighborhoods apart. I don't really want a little store right next to me. You know, I want to keep the neighborhood. I'd rather see us invest in the main street here in our downtown core. So I'm more about that for right now in the town. I mean, that's where I'm at with it. It could just get sticky, I think, to me.
Any questions on this end?
Yeah, mine's real quick. I might be mistaken, but aren't we already doing that with the larger condos and apartment complexes we're putting in, where the lower floors allowing those things?
Yes, we allow for mixed use development, so we do allow for the option to have some commercial on the ground floors, you know, as the market would demand.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Just one more follow-up, maybe for Bill and Carmen, in terms of, because we're limited in space, it sounds like there's not an appetite to, you know, suddenly go for this one. So is this one that has legs that we should use our space to oppose? Or, because I don't think it went very far this last session, am I right? So is this one we have something else that might be more pressing that is worth getting on there?
It's a good question.
Yeah, my sense, I would keep it on our list in terms of ones that we highlight, just because there is a lot of interest in it. And so, you know, that's one thing we did with the list with the longer list at the end of last session, is went through and looked at, and some of them from last year are probably not viable bills for 2026. I think this one will still see a lot of activity.
I think too, also to underscore Bill's point, we're hearing more and more on bills, even ones that already passed. I mean, staff have already received emails, perhaps you have too, with some of the choices they made about housing and what we have to require in zones that say, I just don't believe the city has no control anymore in this, or something to that effect. And like Bill said, this one is the epitome. It so nicely highlights how much control is trying to be shifted from local to state. It might be the best idea in the world, but the idea that it could pass at the state and something happens in a neighborhood that just doesn't want it and the city just has to go, there's nothing we can do. It just further emphasizes that point about local control, I think, in a way so many can understand.
Okay, any other questions? Anybody down here?
All right, the third and final section for the main 3 points for the agenda. This is the public safety. We have always had things like support public safety, improve public safety, which are great phrases. I did do something a little bit more memorable, and that's a phrase I'm hearing a lot in people's social media, kind of on both sides of the aisle, is going beyond thoughts and prayers, and reminding that there are choices they're making in Olympia. It's not just about gun control. There's things about public safety that as a city's perspective, either move that forward or set us back. So this is the public safety one. There is a bill recommending changing public defense services. As you probably don't remember, but in the recap, this actually wasn't legislative. It was from the Supreme Court that changed the allocations for caseloads for public defenders to such extreme levels that some cases are just walking because there's no public defenders to take it. So this bill does move us forward in finding a little more balanced approach. And then the second one is there is a bill out there looking for some support from the state level for aviation support. Not that we would, Chief doesn't get to go out and buy a helicopter, but we do borrow those from the large jurisdictions around us. So this is a relationship thing, throwing our support with them. On the negative side, House Bill 1512 would effectively eliminate most common traffic stops. Now, while traffic stops aren't necessarily violent crime, we just talked about the neighborhood and the importance with which walkability was one of those. So, you know, people in Sumner particularly, I think because of our walkability, traffic stops are not minor things. People speeding or blowing through a stop sign, that's not insignificant. The other piece of that is just and if you need to, Chief could probably speak to this, just a feeling of, you know, getting away with something and then escalating behavior rather than checking it as something simpler like a traffic thing. And that's just our overall safety. And then 1322 is about juveniles having lesser sentences, more diversion. You know, the community, we have unfortunately experienced that personally with the 2 juveniles who did the shooting at Winco. At least their bail was set rather light. They were actually sent home with ankle monitors. Community did not respond well to that. So any bill trying to seek more of that, again, not to nothing against juveniles, but they are starting to make some very violent choices even here in Sumner, and we would like to reverse that trend.
Any other questions? Barbara?
I did have a question. Yeah, I think I'm just curious, Carmen, on this one. I was curious, the police pursuit wasn't mentioned, or like, I think I was just curious what other items. I think that the juvenile one had to do with there's a couple laws they passed, I feel like, making it so you couldn't question juveniles and that kind of stuff. Why is that not part of it?
Good memory, good memory. Some of this is to our previous conversation, what we think are going to gain legs. WASPIC actually made the choice to not try to tackle questioning juveniles in the short session. So that's the reason we're following their lead and leaving it out for the short session. That will likely return in a year's time before the next long session. That is still an important bill we would like to see passed. But I think, you know, we made the choice not to counter the trend chosen by WASPIC since they are the leaders in this. And pursuit isn't on here because they already reversed it, which is one thing we are paying the political capital for. So particularly law enforcement area is one that's challenging because we did get the win with pursuits reinstated.
Got it. So just to restate what you said, the reason some of the items here are selected is not because they're the only issues that we see, but because they're the issues that we're teaming up with other folks to get a louder voice.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
All right, anybody else? Anybody down here? Nope.
All right. So I'm just going to quickly go onto page 2. Sorry, this is InDesign, so it looks a little weird. These are the 3. So this is the guardrails. The front is the part, you know, these days we're working more digitally than handing legislators print copies. So the second side doesn't matter as much. In fact, it's a little awkward to be like, hey, there's 2 pages to that digital file. However, the other piece of this, as we discussed earlier, is giving all of us the guardrails for when we're speaking for the city of Sumner. When you're speaking personally, none of this matters. You do all still retain the right to participate at a personal level, you know, not representing that you're from the city of Sumner or speaking for the city of Sumner. We all retain that. However, when speaking for the city of Sumner, we wanted to try to give all of us 3 large guiding principles that would help us know as things were moving fast, you know, they're passing bills at something crazy like 2 a.m. these days. We would know where we as the city of Sumner would like to speak. So the first one is transportation. For the first time, this is not on the front as one of the 3 main ones, just because this is the short session. They have a difficult budget and they've already passed the transportation budget. So, however, we didn't want to go silent on transportation just in case. So this has keeping transportation moving. This is where we snuck in things that we don't anticipate, but things like the 166 SR 410 interchange. One thing, I don't know if you remember, is they had allocated money to WashDOT. The one interchange WashDOT was going to do, not the city of Sumner on 410, was the 162 SR 410 interchange, Valley Avenue. But when the WashDOT budget got tight, they pushed that back 10 years. So it's still on the books, but it's 10 years out.
I was wondering why you didn't mention the port, you know, the importance of 167 to the port, because like last week I went on a port tour and, you know, just the amount of products that come into our area that have to be distributed and how many are landing in our industrial, MIC, so I think that would be something that they need to remember that Sumner is an MIC.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. The planners have done such a good job. When you think Sumner, you think Main Street and that small town charm, that it is hard to always keep hammering in that we are the largest manufacturing industrial center in Pierce County. So I will add, I have space, so I will add something about the
Thank-
port. The one thing that did actually pass on the transportation budget was an ask from the WashDOT to keep moving on the SR 167 corridor improvements. They had done an initial study and then it was going to get shelved. Well, if you shelve a study, those things do not have a long shelf life. That would mean we'd probably go back to square one. So they did pass some funding to keep that moving forward. But just trying to keep reiterating, and the port's a big, big part of that. So I will add a sentence in.
Nice, good job. Anybody else down here? All right,
Mayor, if I may just add in, one other change I see now that I'm gonna recommend that we add is just the 162 corridor in general, because we talk about the 162 410 interchange. There's also a lot of work being done on 162 all the way out to Ording, and there's a lot of studies right now. So I think that's important because that does affect our traffic here in the city.
yes.
So if council's okay with that, we'll add that as well.
Are you guys all right with that? Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right, the next one, this one was. I was doing, this is when I say I'm trying to shift the prepositions, so it's not about the city, but it's about the public that the state serves through us in the city. This is probably the one that was the hardest to switch around. This is basically the section that's the, please stop playing in the local government sandbox. And it can so easily sound like, this is us saying, stay out of our area. This is our turf, right? And then that creates that us, them. The one fact that I tried to hone in on is that for the average person, having control in their government, engagement in their government is simply easier here than going to Olympia. Sumner's lucky. We are, well, most days, less than an hour's drive away from Olympia, but still the thought of trying to get to one of those sessions because you don't like the land use being done in your neighborhood is just a little bit crazy. That you're expected to go over there to have that impact. So we tried to shift the focus from an us, them about planning and decisions to really thinking about the public. And if you want good civic engagement, I believe it's National Civics Day today, that really happens easier and more equitably at the local level. So this is trying to remind lawmakers that it is about the public. It isn't so much about us and control, although that's part of it. But what we really like them to focus on is for people to have control of their government that does work better for them at the local level.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anybody else? All right,
And then the last one is efficiency. It's not an oxymoron to talk about efficiency in government. But this is trying to get to the reminder with what Bill was saying about the budget they're facing, to just think about efficiencies rather than more taxes or trying to, as Jason said, shift things to the local level.
any questions?
Trying to put a positive spin on that one.
Go ahead, Andy.
I was just curious, because I think the three main issues that I see that we covered for most of all on the first page, like is housing, safety, transportation. And then as far as like the safety one, is there any other, there's nothing in these 3 points that are kind of the guardrails about public safety. Is there something that you think would be helpful to like, because I just feel like if something comes up about public safety that's a little bit unexpected, I don't really see anything here to help guide you guys.
I do think the front third one takes care of that with the go beyond thoughts and prayers. So that's the reason I didn't repeat it over here, is because I felt like our law enforcement and, chief and deputy chief are quite vocal and speak very well to how practically ideas play out on the practical level in their jobs. So I think that phrase go beyond thoughts and prayers, while that had an oppose and approve under it, that still gives you that main category to send them in and speak to how a particular bill, even if it's something completely unexpected, might help us with safety or move us backward.
I'll just add on that, I mean, the verbiage on that is increased support for victims and protection of potential victims. So any potential change to public safety that re-victimizes people or does not protect their long-term outcome, in the court system and arresting offenders would be contrary to this, in my eyes.
Okay, so the first page kind of covers some of that, so we don't need a few of those things.
Alright, are we good? Are we good down here? Alright,
Bill, did you want any closing about being involved, or? You kind of did a teaser and I didn't want to close with that.
Yeah, no, we can touch on that just so folks are aware. I think AWC has its legislative days every year. I think this year it's like January 21 or 22. So if you want to, you can join that if you want to spend some time with some of your fellow elected officials, or, a number of folks came down last year and we scheduled meetings with a number of legislators, which it can be kind of a cattle call. The session is so kind of hectic and they schedule in these kind of 15-minute increments typically, though we were able to find some fairly good time with the 31st district folks too. And if we want to set something like that up again this year, we can certainly do that. Or I'd also say, if there are particular issues of interest to any of you individually, and it works for your work schedule or personal schedule, and you want to just come down for a day, see a hearing, if you want to testify, stuff like that, let me know. Because as frustrating as the legislature can be, it's an interesting process. And if you haven't been down to Olympia to check it out for a few hours, it can be a lot of fun, and it really connects with the work that you guys do locally. So if any of those are of interest, we can work on it.
thank you, Bill.
And for your calendars, city action days for AWC is January 21st and 22nd. And we'll be talking to council more about that leading up. Pros and cons of that versus one-on-one meetings.
Okay, I think we are questioned out, so we will move on to ordinance number 2946, delegating authority for long-term debt issuance, and I will call on Jason, I think.
Thank you, Mayor. It'll take us just a minute to bring in the presenters. On that last item, just wanted to flag for you that it is coming back for your consideration on November 17th. So we'll see it again in a couple weeks
Okay,
for adoption.
thank you.
Turn over to Cassandra to introduce this topic, and we'll go.
Good evening, everyone. So before you is ordinance 2946. This is delegating authority for city authorized representatives to negotiate a bond issuance for our biosolids modernization project, affectionately known as the dryer for the past several years. With me, I have Dave Traeger from DA Davidson. Dave has very ably shepherded the city through multiple debt issues over the past 2 decades, quite some time. And then we also have Stacy Amasaki joining us from Foster Garvey. Many of you know we've worked with Cynthia Weed as bond counsel for quite some time. Cynthia is making some career changes. And so Stacy is joining us as bond counsel. We're excited to work with her on our financing team. So our biosolids modernization dryer, this is a piece of the infrastructure at our wastewater treatment facility. This converts our sludge into a Class A biosolid. The equipment that we currently have is nearing end of life. We've been kind of babying it for several years now. And it really is responsible for giving us a cost-effective method of drying and disposing of waste material from our treatment facility. It is an expensive piece of infrastructure. Our estimate for this is, I believe, right around $27 million. Of that, because of under the interlocal agreement we have with the city of Bonnie Lake will be paying 54% of that capital cost, leaving Sumner with a capital cost of 46% of that, or roughly between $12 and $13 million. We will be opening bids on this project over the next several weeks. And so we will have a more finite cost upon bid opening. What this ordinance does is very similar to the ordinance delegating authority for the debt issuance that we just issued earlier this year for the Public Works Operations Facility. This delegates authority to city authorized representatives to approve the final terms of bonds being sold up to a maximum aggregate par of $14 million to modernize and equip the project known as the Biosolids Modernization. The authorized representatives under this ordinance would be Kathy Hayden, our mayor, city administrator Jason Wilson, our deputy city administrator Jeff Steffens, and myself, the CFO. On our ratings team will be those authorized representatives, plus the addition of Public Works Director Michael Kosa and City Attorney Andrew Marquez. DA Davidson operating as our underwriter, Foster Garvey as a bond counsel, and then our ratings team would be to be determined. The bond rating process is individual for each issue. The city itself is not rated, rather the ratings agencies rate each issue that goes onto the market. Previously, Standard & Poor's rated our 2025 water sewer revenue bond at an AA, that's an investment grade rating, meaning no bond insurance was required, and we'll be going through a similar process for this issuance. The parameters given to the authorized representatives under this ordinance would limit us to a maximum aggregate part of $14 million to finance the city's portion of the project. A final maturity date no later than 20 years from the issuance date. That timeline is picked because part of our financial policies indicates that we won't issue long-term debt that extends out past the useful life of the asset being financed. A maximum coupon rate and true interest costs of 6%. And then the delegation would expire on November the 3rd of 2026 with a closing date to be determined. This item will come before you, the ordinance, for action on November the 3rd. That will be the only action needed by council. That authority, that delegation of authority will serve to allow those authorized representatives named to finalize the terms of the sale and place the bonds. The next time that council would see this is similar to what we did with the operations facility, is I will come back to you after the bonds close with a report of the final terms, but again, all within the parameters of this ordinance. Our next steps will be bringing this forth for council consideration on November 3rd. The contract award for the project is scheduled for November the 17th with debt issuance and construction to occur to begin in early 2026. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that's a lot of money that we're talking about. It's a project that has been in the works for quite some time. We have evaluated multiple funding options for this project. Our first choice was to issue Public Works Trust Fund debt through the state. That is a very low interest loan, typically between 0.5% and 2% for infrastructure projects. As we saw in the last presentation, the demands on state revenues are great. We applied for that through 2 different cycles, and although we've got a great qualified project, the asks far exceeded the amount available, and we were not able to fund through that program. We've used that program successfully in the past for our wastewater treatment facility expansions and our decant facility. Unfortunately, we just weren't able to get a piece of that funding for this time. So this is how we'd like to move forward.
Any comments on that, Barbara?
I just have a question about, have you ordered the dryer yet? Because I know, like with a lot of vehicles and other things, you have so many years so you have to order ahead. So it sounds like you have.
Yeah, the dryer was approved by council earlier this year.
Yeah.
And the first payment for it is actually due right after the first of the year, at 26th. So that is why you're seeing us move forward with the debt issuance now, because we're going to start with construction and dryer procurement early in 26, and this takes several months to get our financing put together.
So when will the dryer be delivered? Do you know? Or-
I don't know that date, but
But at least it's in the.
it's in the being
pipeline.
built.
Yeah.
There's the fabrication of what's already been ordered that had to be done ahead of time because that fabrication of that mechanical piece then drives the design of the enclosure.
Oh, yeah. So, okay, thank you.
Andy? Go ahead, Andy, I'll get her.
Yeah, I'm just curious, can you remind me, so this one, it looks like the debt is gonna fully fund the project. Is there anything we paid in cash, or is this, like, none of this is gonna be paid out of our, I thought we had it in the budget, as I'm trying to remember how this works, because it looks like we're basically approving a bond to cover 100% of it.
So there were some local funds that have already been expended on this project, specifically going with design and some of the pre-order of some of the fabricated products. The way the ordinance is written, we would be able to recoup some of those costs. And then the full project cost gets worked into the rate model.
Got it. And then as far as like options on doing this bond, are there any options? Like usually when you're doing a loan, you're trying to figure out interest rate, leverage, like 50%, 30% down. So this one's like 100%. Is that something that is going to be addressed as you get the terms of the bond, or something that is just we're deciding that when we approve it?
Hi, I'm Dave Trageser. I'm Managing Director of P.A. Davidson, a longtime bond underwriter. So we will operate within parameters of the ordinance, and our current model is that we'd fund a dollar amount to the project fund. And we're estimating that right now at about $12.6 million, but that will change. As noted there, we have the ability to go up to $14 million if need be in the project. Bonds will not be priced until early next year in February. And so the interest rates will not be finalized, the amounts will not be finalized until that time. So the city will be able to direct us for the final amount they want in that project fund before we finalize anything.
Okay. And then on the rating, last time we did a bond, we had to go out and get a rating. So now we have a rating, we don't have to go get that again, correct?
No, every bond issue, you need to go back to the rating agency. The good news is, because we issued the bonds earlier this past year with that strong AA investment grade rating, we'll be back to S&P in the process. And the amount of disclosure work needed for that is minimized because we just went through a lot of it. But we still have to go back to S&P and request a rating on these bonds.
Got it. Okay. And then a couple more questions. So on the life of the equipment, is a 20-year bond is the maximum? What's the expected life of this equipment?
So typically we assign a 20-year useful life to infrastructure out of the wastewater treatment facility. We take excellent care of our equipment and our facilities. So we would expect that the useful life would be a little longer than that. But what we account for is a 20-year useful life.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if I could add just one little thing, you asked about useful life. So even though this is a maximum term of 20 years, bonds are sold by maturity. So the average life of the bonds is only about 12 years.
Okay.
I'll just add to something like wastewater treatment. The environmental regulations are ever changing, right? So this is the technology for today. I can't tell you what the technology is going to be needed in 20, 25 years. They're constantly changing the water quality that's being discharged. So it's something that we're always having to adjust our process and implement new technologies to make sure that we are meeting Department of Ecology guidelines.
Okay, last question right now. I just was curious. So this is the second bond we've done in the last 12 months. I don't think we historically have done a lot of this in Sumner. Can you just tell me, like, so how much was the other bond that we just did, and how much is this, and how does that compare to maybe the last, have you been 10 years? Mm-hmm. How does that compare as far as like, how are we tracking?
So I joined the city in 2012. Prior to that, the last debt issue prior to that was it was a 2008 refunding of some 1998 water sewer revenue bonds. We do issue occasional debt, just not these large issues. We've done a private placement for the cemetery building. We did a private placement for a bond anticipation note for the Public Works Operations Facility. We've got a decant, we've got a Public Works Trust Fund loan through the decant, but actually going out on the bond market isn't something that we regularly have done. That being said, we've been working, in the case of the operations facility for over a decade. We've been working on the dryer for several years. It's just the timing has such that these projects that we've been working on design and kind of planning for so long are kind of both coming to term right here in 2025. So it's not something that we do often, but when we do, we want to make sure that we're doing it thoughtfully and that we're exhausting all the other options as well.
I'm partly just thinking like next budget cycle, which is next year for, I'm assuming for the biennium. Just to think about reserves and things so that I just think the idea of debt issuance is not the first idea that we would like to do a lot of it.
Yep.
So thank you.
Well, that shortened some of my questions. But, so we share this with Bonnie Lake, and are we assured that Bonnie Lake has their share of the money?
Yes.
So we're feeling good about that. What's the worst possible scenario we could hit with bonds? I mean, to Andy's point, I mean, it's the second one. We've got some big projects here. What could be the worst possible outcome?
So as water sewer revenue bonds, and these would be paid out of the sewer fund, they're worked into the rates. We already have worked that debt service into the rate model. So really where your risk is, and please correct me if I missed up, is in your interest rate, if things all of a sudden go sideways, but you have until really that very last moment before doing a go, no go. I mean, we saw that with the operations facility. There was a lot of volatility in the week prior to issuing those bonds. And so we were working with our underwriter, our bond counsel, daily up until literally maybe 30 minutes before giving that go. So there's that. Worst case facility is we are unable to issue bonds for some reason. The economy crashes, and we end up doing, and then we're under contract and we would do an interfund loan from other funds.
Got it. Thanks.
So,
Any other questions, Barbara?
I think if we don't do it, the expense of taking all that waste to Eastern Washington is so high that, we really need to keep up to date on our equipment, so.
and that's an excellent comment. Thank you very much for that. And that really is the other alternative is without the biosolids dryer, you are trucking waste. So.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
down there?
I'll just say, so I fully agree. We have to do it. It's just a matter of, it costs money. That's all. I mean, we have to do it.
Yeah, this is one of your critical pieces of infrastructure at the wastewater treatment facility, and it's really, if you don't have it, the whole system doesn't work.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, we have to do it.
And then if you think about the scale here, this is a, 26 million, let's just round it up to 30 million. That represents about 10% of the total value of assets out of the wastewater treatment facility, just some magnitude, order of magnitude, right? It's a lot of money, but that whole plant is a lot of money.
All right. Anybody else last time?
I do have one last thing.
Wait, go ahead,
Maybe
Pat.
she's gonna ask it.
Well, this is about financing, just a question, because I don't know how this really works, but there wasn't an opportunity to do the financing through the state at a really low interest rate. And so we're gonna have to maybe select one that's as high as 6% as opposed to, maybe even less than 1%. So what I'm wondering is there an opportunity to like move forward with this, but to go back to the state with the same issue, the same project to see if they'll finance it in a couple years? I mean, I know as a homeowner, I thought I'll buy a house now, but I know that I can refinance it a couple years and save a few bucks. Is that a possibility? Or no, because there are fees or whatever?
Well,
I don't
if
know.
I can make a comment to answer your question, council member. So remember the 6% is the maximum parameter in the ordinance. If the bonds were priced today, the rate would be closer to 4.06%.
Okay.
We are subject to the market, as Cassandra mentioned. The bonds will not be priced, interest rates will not be locked in until June 22nd. So we have that market risk until that time. The bonds typically are sold with what we call a 10-year par call provision, which means that they cannot be refinanced for about 10 years. After that point, you could pay off any and all the bonds without penalty at your discretion.
Great, thank you.
So last week, I think it was last week, I think this is only Monday, but didn't we talk about the sewer rate? So, and the 5%, so was this calculated into that?
It was.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. Last chance. Last chance, guys. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Awesome.
Okay,
Thank you, Stacy.
we will move to resolution number 1732, 2026 ad valorem property tax levy, and I will call on Jason, I guess.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm actually gonna turn it over to Deputy City Administrator Jeff Steffens.
Okay,
This one. Trade.
come on down, Jeff.
Screw that.
Hope I don't screw this up.
Me too.
Switching spots. So good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're going to talk about the 2026 property tax levy. Just a reminder, property tax is one of the largest contributors to our general fund, and it is our most stable revenue source. Did I take one of your slides? Look at that. With me tonight to really do all the heavy lifting and answer any difficult questions you might have, Chief Financial Officer Cassandra Ray.
Thank you. That was fancy.
If she doesn't know, maybe I'll know, but probably doesn't. Yes.
Oh,
Amen.
we have to make this topic just as engaging as we can because nobody likes to talk about taxes, us included. So again, property taxes, most stable revenue source. It makes up about 21% of our general fund revenue in 2026. The reason it is considered the most stable is because property taxes are considered 100% collectible. Pierce County acts as our treasurer. Property taxes are a primary lien on property, and so, you know, there's really very little risk in being able to collect the amounts that have been assessed. We get to talk about this every year. We have a pretty standard timeline. We receive our preliminary assessed valuation from Pierce County in late September. We crunch some numbers here at the finance level and then take that to Finance and Personnel Committee, and we took it this year on October the 9th. Bring it to bring the Finance and Personnel Committee's recommendation to a full council study session. That's what we're doing this evening. We will hold a required public hearing for our community to be able to have input into this topic. That's scheduled for November the 3rd. And then we'll come back to council on November the 17th for action on the resolution. We're required to certify our levy request to Pierce County by the end of November. It's usually November 30th, but because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we're required to certify that by November the 28th. Sorry about that. Under RCW, under state statute, taxing districts with a population of 10,000 or more are authorized to increase its levy up to 1% from the highest lawful levy since 1985. I don't know why they picked that year, but that is the year that we get to work with. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. Property taxes just aren't very intuitive. And so when we hear that, you know, we're increasing 1% or we're increasing any number of percent, people are automatically going to think that we're increasing their individual property tax bills by that amount. And that's not really how property tax works. What we're authorized to do is take the amount we levied in the prior year, which is usually the maximum amount, and increase that by 1%. And then that's allocated out through the levy rate based on assessed valuation. We always get an example of a ordinance or resolution requesting the highest lawful levy. This does a great check for us on our numbers. This is just a snip from Pierce County for this year. When we look at our property tax, the 1% that we are talking about in the statute is on the city's portion of the property tax. Property tax is made up of multiple taxing jurisdictions, both senior and junior taxing jurisdictions. Of the overall property tax bill in the city of Sumner, the city receives about 8%. The Sumner Bonning Lake School District combined with the Washington State levy for schools makes up about 47%. Most of that is voted. And East Pierce Fire and Rescue has about 18% of the total property tax pie. The rest is made up from Transit Authority, Library District, Pierce County. You can see all those up on the screen. And again, the ones in red are those that are voted levy impacts. When we get our levy certification from Pierce County, one of the things that we do is we take a look, what are the changes? What are the changes in the city's assessed valuation, both on an overall level? For us, we went from $5.6 billion to 5.7, about a 3% change. But of that, the single family residence assessed valuation increased about 1.8%. What that's telling us is that we had a good amount of an increase in assessed valuation for non-residential. And we see that when we look at our new construction and improvement numbers. Looking at our tax year 2025 assessed valuation, we don't quite have all the numbers for 2026 yet, but our overall AV industrial properties within the city of Sumner make up about 54% of that. So that's what we see in our manufacturing and industrial center. Commercial makes up about 17%, and the rest is residential. Of that residential, single family is 21%, and multifamily picks up about 8%. We always look at how this distribution is, because one of the things we always look at is, the impact of our non-residential, the impact of our industrial center, and we see that they are kind of contributing towards that property tax to the tune of about 54%. When we come to Finance and Personnel Committee, what we're doing is looking at the numbers as far as what could be levied, what the Finance and Personnel Committee's recommendation is to be levied, and then what the changes are overall and what the changes are for our average single-family residents. Our tax year 2025 levy was $5.04 million. The change over that at 1% is $50,409. That's the additional 1% that we can levy onto tax year 2026. Additionally, statute gives us the opportunity and the authority to claim additional revenue from new construction and improvements. For tax year 2026, that amount that we're able to levy is $142,000. That is a big amount. We usually are between maybe $30,000 and $50,000. And this is just reflective of development that's been going on in Sumner. So these are things that were not on the tax rolls in 2025. They were still in progress, but in that time, they have joined the tax rolls. And so we have that opportunity to levy them onto our levy request. We had no additional revenue from annexations. We do have the ability to levy a bit of additional revenue for administrative refunds. These are occasions when a property is either changes uses or it's somehow diminished and it's taken off the property rolls. And RCW gives us the opportunity to re-levy that amount to distribute it throughout all of our assessed valuation. With those items, the 1% increase over last year's levy, plus additional revenue from new construction and improvement and administrative refunds, our total tax year 2026 levy would be $5.24 million. Per $1,000 of assessed valuation, we would have a levy rate of rounded about 91 cents per thousand. The monthly change from 2025 for our average single-family residence would be about $1.11. After conversations with Finance Committee, the direction was to proceed for tax year 2026 with retaining the $350,000 that is dedicated towards the City Council Strategic Reserve that was begun in 2018, as well as the $330,000 towards street operations and capital. At the 5.24 for the total 2026 levy, we would have an increase in the general fund of just under $200,000. And then again, for the average single-family residence, in 2025, the city portion of the property tax was about $485. It would go to $498 in 2026. So an annual increase of $13.26, monthly $1.11. I know that's a lot of numbers that get thrown. I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, this would come to a public hearing on November 3rd and then action on November the 17th.
Barbara, can you explain the council reserve fund?
Of course.
And what it's used for?
Goodness. So the city council strategic reserve was, in 2018, we actually accessed some bank capacity of our property tax. And part of that bank capacity that we accessed was to begin developing two different kind of funding streams. The first one was funding for street capital and street operations, specifically to help leverage grant funds. Most grants have a local match, and we wanted to be sure that we were positioned in a way that we could take advantage of that local match. That has been super successful. We've used that every year since then, and it's used exactly for what it's intended to do. The other funding stream that was developed with council concurrence was the city council strategic reserve, and it's $350,000 of property tax that are essentially earmarked on an annual basis. They're kept in a separate account on our general ledger, and it really is to give the opportunity for council to be able to react quickly and pivot quickly in case of either a capital or an operational need. It's worked beautifully. I do think it's one of the most successful strategic kind of decisions that's been made. We were able to fund work on the WUNRF. There were some funds that were initially dedicated several years ago to Wood and Main, to that intersection. When we were able to get capital funding through a grant for that intersection, we were able to pivot very, very quickly, because city council had the resources to tap that strategic reserve fund and move it off into that. For 2025, city council has directed funding towards both Heritage Park and then for Washington Street, which I think was fabulous. Washington Street is residential. It's in very poor shape. It needs work. But as successful as our public works department is at getting grant funding, that's for arterials and for corridors. There just really isn't grant funding for residential streets. So being able to, identify that need in council to be able to say, we can take action on this. I think it's been a very successful program.
Thanks for the explanation.
Anybody else? Matt, are you all right?
I'm back.
Andy, go ahead.
I just always have to ask, whenever you say this is the second largest revenue source for the city, how are we doing in sales tax, which is not the most stable, but obviously it affects, like, are we ahead of budget, behind budget, right on budget? Because obviously that should be, I think, part of the conversation about increasing property tax.
Absolutely. So just kind of a reminder on our sales tax philosophy. We tend to be very conservative in our forecasting. We've done that for several years. We take the most recent year that we have total data for, so it's usually the year before, and we lift that by a very conservative amount. This year for 2025, we lifted by 2% off of 2023. We're going to end up right there for the non-construction portion. So our regular recurring sales tax is right in line with where our forecast is. Where we have seen gains and we are expected to end higher than our forecast is in construction-related sales tax. We've had a number of large projects going on, our operations facility, White River Restoration, multifamily. We've had some good construction that's been kind of languishing for years in the pipeline that is now, dirt's being moved. And so we are seeing that construction-related sales tax come in higher than we forecasted. I don't have a number where we're going to end up. It will be higher than our forecast. It's one of those things that will be coming back to council talking about, what you want to do with that as a one-time revenue, because the construction-related sales tax, we're always going to consider a one-time revenue. Buildable lands aren't going to be infinite. So those are more one-time versus the recurring non-construction related sales tax. But we will end up on the plus side because of the construction related.
Okay, and you kind of answered my second question, which was on those types of construction sales tax that are one time. Obviously, they come in, we create a new building, but we also bring people into the city. We bring traffic and a lot of stuff like that. So, do we have a policy currently about if we have a strategic reserve for that, or we don't? Can you clarify?
That's currently not part of our financial policies. It's certainly something that council could direct us to take a look at.
Okay, I'd love to see that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. But that's what I was going to say. So the last year, Washington Street. So it's like the our general fund or our city council strategic reserve is going towards the roads. So what should we be doing to have a strategic fund for the roads, road maintenance here? I mean, what would that look like? Where else do we get the money from? Feels like we're behind the 8 ball.
Well, so for road maintenance specifically, I mean, council took a huge step over this last quarter with the Transportation Benefit District.
But before that,
Before that, it was use of one-time revenues or trying to maximize grants as possible, but it was very much a pay as you go.
okay, thanks.
Anybody down there, questions? Matthew.
Yeah, just generally, Cassandra, for my information as I'm understanding property taxes, I have to assume that most cities kind of utilize this ability to increase their revenues from property tax on a yearly basis, that we're not different than other cities in that respect. Are there historically times where we didn't take the full 1% or we didn't raise taxes in a given year? You know, I'm thinking of like 2008, 2009 or something like that. Like, can you kind of give us a little bit of history about that?
So 2008, 2009 is when the city annexed to the fire district. And so there were, this was before my time, so I'm going to rely on.
Great.
Essentially, so a portion of the property tax went with the fire district, and the city made the commitment at that time to not also raise taxes to kind of fill that hole. And so therefore we were banking capacity. Did I get that right?
Cool.
Okay. So we were banking capacity. We banked capacity for quite some time. But even when we were banking capacity, we were still increasing by 1% over the prior year's collections. We just weren't increasing up to our full maximum levy. We were still taking the 1%, just not on the full amount that we could have taken the 1% off. In 2018, again, we made some pretty significant changes. We accessed bank capacity. That's when we implemented the strategic reserve, as well as additional funding for street operations and street capital. Since that point, we've been at our maximum levy, and we have taken the 1%. Situations where we wouldn't, you know, if there's some complicated requirements. If IPD, which is the implicit price deflator, drops below 1%, then you could only take up to the max of the IPD if your population is over 10,000. But really, mostly it's going to be a policy decision. Where you kind of have to balance is when you're looking at inflation. You know, historically, inflation has risen way above 1%. So we're always playing catch up. And property tax is a big part of our funding mix. So when you're always playing that catch up, if you decide for 1 year not to take that 1%, then not only are you missing out on that, but you're compounding it going further into the future. And so you're playing catch up even more, just because you're never quite meeting that inflationary target. So we try and keep current as much as we can, just like everyone else, our costs continue to increase as well.
Sure. And I think I seem to recall last year's legislative agenda, I think Carmen has maybe left, but that we advocated for kind of a lift on that lid from 1% to, was it 3%, a maximum of 3%?
A maximum of 3% or CPI.
Okay.
Whichever was lower. Yeah, that's right.
But that didn't go very far in Olympia, is that?
It didn't. That's been kind of bandied about in committee for a couple of sessions now. It went further this time, but it still didn't make it out of. Carmen would have to correct me. I don't believe it made it out to action on the floor. So and from what we're hearing, it is not likely to come back over the next couple of sessions. It's one of those things that it would have been a great funding tool to have. It was something that, again, you know, that the cap is a funding tool. It's always going to be council policy and council decision on where you want to implement that, you know, but that would have been a good tool to have, kind of where we're at now, and we will just make the best of what we have.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, anybody down here? No. Barbara, you good? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have a city administrator report tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I'll mention is we do have Street of Treats on Friday from 5 to 7 downtown, so. Come down there and see everybody trick or treating some of their Main Street businesses, and police department will be also on hand. That's it.
That's it?
That's
Wow. Okay. All right, so we do have an executive session for the purposes of discussing with legal counsel pending and potential litigation pursuant to RCW. Do you know how long that?
Let's go 20 minutes.
20 minutes. All right,
20 minutes, and can you stay the time, Mayor?
and it is at 7:25.
There'll be no action to follow.
No action to follow.
So.